The hospital lights hummed like distant thunder. In room 317, silence had a weight, the kind that pressed against the ribs until even breathing felt like guilt. Ethan sat by the window staring at a world he couldn't touch anymore. Outside, rain chased its reflection down the glass, each drop trembling before falling. A mirror of how he now lived. He used to run marathons, own companies, fill rooms with laughter. But ever since the accident, everything about him had slowed. Even the air seemed to move differently around his wheelchair, like it hesitated to disturb the quiet despair he carried. Nurses came and went. Friends had tried at first, then slowly vanished under the excuse of giving him space. His phone, once a battlefield of notifications, now lay untouched on the nightstand, gathering dust like memories of who he used to be. Then she walked in. Lily. Not with the polite pity of a volunteer, but with the confident energy of someone who still believed in sunlight. Her sneakers squeaked against the floor, her ponytail swaying with purpose. She wasn't supposed to be there, and she was covering a shift for another nurse. But fate doesn't ask for appointments. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice calm but bright. "I'm Lily. I'll be helping you today." Ethan didn't look up. "You don't have to call it helping. Just doing your job." She smiled, a small, knowing smile that dared him to look at her. "Maybe I like helping people who've forgotten how strong they are." He finally met her eyes. There was no pity there, just light. That's how it began, not with love at first sight, but with something subtler. A spark that didn't burn, only warmed. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city. Let's see how wide kindness still spreads." Days passed, and Lily's visits became a rhythm. She didn't treat Ethan like a patient. She treated him like a man, one who still had choices, even if his legs didn't move. "Why do you talk to me like that?" he asked one morning. "Like what?" "Like I'm not broken," she shrugged. "Because you're not." He wanted to argue, but the conviction in her eyes left no space for protest. It was Lily who first dared him, not to walk, but to try. "Let's play a game," she said one rainy afternoon, pulling the curtains open to let in the dim light. "If you win, I'll bring you your favorite coffee tomorrow." "If I win, you have to promise me something." Ethan arched a brow. "And what's that?" "You'll stop calling yourself broken." He chuckled for the first time in months. "That's a bet you can't win." "Then you're scared," she teased, leaning closer, her eyes bright with mischief. "Come on, Mr. Cole. Dare accepted?" Something about her tone, playful yet firm, stirred a part of him he thought was gone. "Fine," he said quietly. "Dare accepted." That day she didn't just challenge his words. She cracked open the wall he had built. When Lily left that evening, Ethan watched her walk away, the scent of her shampoo still lingering, fresh, like rain after drought. He didn't realize it yet, but she had already begun rewriting the silence inside him. That night, for the first time since the accident, he dreamed, not of what he'd lost, but of what he might still find. The moon hung over the city like a quiet witness. Ethan wheeled closer to the window, whispering into the glass, "Who are you, Lily?" Somewhere far down the corridor, her laughter echoed, soft, fearless, alive. He smiled. "Maybe. The dare isn't so bad after all." The next morning arrived dressed in sunlight, the kind that seeps through half-closed blinds and paints golden stripes on hospital sheets. Ethan was already awake, pretending to read, though his eyes hadn't moved past the same paragraph in 10 minutes. When the door creaked open, he didn't need to look up to know it was her. There was something about the way Lily entered a room. Not cautiously, not loudly, but like she belonged there. She held 2 cups in her hands. "Morning, Mr. Cole. Hope you didn't think I'd forget our deal." He blinked. "You actually brought coffee?" She set one on his table. "Double espresso, no sugar." "You mentioned it once. Thought I wasn't listening?" For a second, Ethan couldn't speak. That small act, remembering something so trivial, felt like someone had gently touched the part of his heart he'd buried under bitterness. He lifted the cup. The warmth seeped into his palms, his chest, his breath. You didn't have to. I know, she cut in softly. That's what makes it count. They drank in silence, broken only by the faint beeping of machines and the rhythmic tick of the wall clock. When Lily stood to leave, she turned back at the door. You still owe me, by the way, he frowned. Owe you what? That promise. You lost the dare, Ethan smiled faintly. And what exactly do I promise? That you'll stop calling yourself broken. He looked at her, at the sincerity carved into her voice. Maybe not today, but soon, her grin widened. I'll take that as progress. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below, and if words fail you, just hit. Like to prove that compassion still matters. After she left, Ethan stared at the empty chair she always used, its shadow stretching long across the floor. He felt something strange, hope maybe, a fragile, trembling thing that made his chest ache. The next few days blurred into a gentle pattern. Breakfast, therapy, Lily's visits. She told him stories about her younger brother, about her stubborn cat who refused to be tamed, about late-night drives when the world felt too heavy, and slowly, Ethan began to talk back. He told her about his company, the one he'd built from scratch, about the night of the accident, how a single swerve on a rainy road changed everything, and about the emptiness that followed, the kind that money couldn't fill. Lily listened, never interrupting. When he spoke of guilt, the passenger who had been in his car, the friend who didn't survive, she reached across the bed and placed her hand over his. You're still here, she whispered. That means something. Ethan swallowed hard. Does it? Yes. Because you can still make things right. Her words echoed in the quiet room long after she left. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her voice kept returning, calm, steady, alive. He remembered the way she looked at him, not with pity, but belief, and he realized something he hadn't in months. Maybe life hadn't ended that night on the highway. Maybe it was just waiting for him to begin again. The next morning, he asked his therapist for an extra session. I want to try harder, he said simply. By the time Lily came by that afternoon, he was already sweating from effort. She froze in the doorway, watching him grip the parallel bars, his arms trembling but determined. You're doing it, she breathed. Almost, he panted, jaw tight. Don't cheer yet. I already am, she said quietly. Her eyes bright. Ethan managed half a step, barely a shuffle, but to him it felt like crossing oceans. When he finally sank back into his wheelchair, Lily knelt beside him, smiling through tears. See? Not broken. Just rebuilding, he laughed weakly. That's your nurse pep talk? No, she said, brushing hair from his forehead. That's my friend pep talk, and for the first time the word friend didn't sting. It soothed. Outside, the evening unfolded into a soft orange haze. Through the window, Ethan watched the sun lower behind city rooftops. He realized Lily had changed something vital, not his body, but his rhythm. Maybe kindness didn't need grand gestures. Maybe it began with showing up and staying. He closed his eyes, letting that thought rest deep inside. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd try again. He would move, even if only an inch. The next few weeks passed like chapters turning slowly in a book Ethan wasn't sure he wanted to finish. Each day brought small victories. A longer stretch in therapy, a deeper conversation with Lily, a new memory that didn't hurt to hold. Yet beneath the fragile peace, something darker still lingered. The shadow of that night. It always came in flashes. Screeching tires, a blur of headlights, the smell of rain and gasoline. Then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Before the paramedics' voices broke through, he had stopped telling people the details long ago. Most couldn't bear to listen. But one evening, as Lily helped him with his exercises, she asked gently, Ethan, what really happened? He froze. His hands tightened around the wheels of his chair. You don't want to know. I do, she said softly. Because I think it's still holding you prisoner. He looked at her, searching for any sign of judgment. There was none, only quiet patience. So he told her about the storm that night, the charity event he'd been rushing to, the glass of champagne he shouldn't have had but did anyway. How his best friend, Mark, had insisted on coming along. How one wrong turn, one patch of water, and 1 second of arrogance had cost a life. Lily didn't interrupt once. When he finished, the room was still. "I killed my best friend," Ethan said, voice breaking. "And now I'm supposed to—" "What? Forgive myself?" Lily's eyes glistened. "No. You're supposed to learn to live again because that's what he'd want you to do." Her words cracked something open in him. Tears came, uninvited, unstoppable. She reached out and held his hand until the shaking stopped. "Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think." The next morning, Lily arrived early. She brought no coffee, no jokes, just a quiet presence. Ethan noticed the dark circles under her eyes. "You look tired," he said. She smiled faintly. "Long night. My brother's been sick again. Hospital runs, prescriptions. You know the drill," he frowned. "You never said he was sick." "Didn't want to make it about me." She waved it off, but her voice wavered. "He's got a heart condition. Been managing it since we were kids." Ethan stared at her, the weight of her calm strength settling in. "And you still come here every day?" She shrugged. "Healing helps me forget I can't fix everything." In that moment, he realized how wrong he'd been to see her only as light. She had her own storms, too. She just danced through them better. That day, when she tried to lift his spirits, he stopped her. "Let's skip therapy for a moment," he said. "Tell me about him, your brother." Her eyes softened with surprise. "You really want to know?" "Yes," he said quietly. "You always listen to me. Maybe I can return the favor." Lily sat down, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "His name's Ryan. He's 21. Sweetest person you'll ever meet. Always wanted to be a pilot, but, well, his heart has other plans." She laughed lightly, then sighed. "We lost our parents when he was 12. So I guess I've been his nurse a lot longer than I've been anyone else's." Ethan listened, feeling something shift, not pity, but understanding. For the first time, he saw her not as the girl who saved him, but as someone fighting her own quiet war. He found himself saying, "Maybe that's why you don't give up on people like me." Lily looked down. "Maybe? Or maybe I just know what broken looks like when it's pretending to be fine." The words hit him harder than he expected. That night, when Lily left early to check on Ryan, Ethan sat alone, thinking about her. The hospital felt emptier without her voice echoing down the corridor. He wheeled himself to the window, staring at the city lights that blinked like distant stars. He thought of Mark, his laughter, his forgiveness that would never be spoken aloud. Then he thought of Lily, her strength, her tired smile, her brother fighting for air somewhere beyond these walls. Maybe pain wasn't something to escape. Maybe it was something people shared until it became bearable. For the first time, Ethan opened his laptop again. Not to check stocks or business emails, but to write. A letter he'd been avoiding for over a year. "Dear Mark," he typed, "I don't know if this letter will ever find peace, but I need to say I'm sorry. Not because I want forgiveness, but because someone reminded me that guilt isn't meant to be home. It's meant to be a lesson." He paused, staring at the blinking cursor. Outside, the city breathed, alive and endless. Inside, for the first time, Ethan felt like he was breathing too. 2 days later, the hospital felt unusually still. No Lily, no laughter. Just the hum of monitors and the whisper of distant footsteps in the hallway. Ethan kept glancing toward the door, waiting for her to burst in with her usual brightness, coffee in one hand and a challenge in the other. But she didn't come. Not that morning, not by noon, not even by the time the sun melted into the skyline. He told himself she was busy, that nurses had long shifts. But the quiet felt too heavy, too wrong. By evening, his restlessness grew unbearable. He wheeled himself to the nurse's station and asked, "Is Lily on duty today?" The head nurse looked up. "Oh," Lily called in. "Her brother's back in the ER. Heart complications." Ethan's chest tightened. Is he okay? They're still running tests, she said. She's been there all day. He nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere, with her. When night fell, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts spinning like rain on glass. For weeks, Lily had been his anchor, his light, and now she was the one struggling to stay afloat. He remembered her words. Healing helps me forget I can't fix everything. Now it was his turn. The next morning, Ethan requested an early discharge. The staff hesitated, but his determination was sharper than any refusal. With assistance, he got into a cab and gave the driver the address he'd overheard Lily mention once, St. Clair's Heart Center. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. When he rolled into the waiting area, he spotted her immediately. Curled in a chair, still in her scrubs, hands wrapped around a cold coffee cup. "Ethan?" She blinked in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" He smiled faintly. "Returning a favor," she shook her head. "You're not even supposed to be out of bed." "Neither are you," he said gently. "But here we are." Lily tried to protest, but her voice cracked. "They said he might need surgery. I can't lose him, Ethan. He's all I have." He reached for her trembling hand, steady and sure. "Then you're not losing him alone." They sat there for hours, through every nurse's update, through the beeping of machines echoing down the hallway. He didn't say much and didn't need to. Sometimes presence was louder than words. At midnight, when the doctor finally came out and said Ryan was stable, Lily broke down. Tears, relief, exhaustion, it all came at once. Ethan pulled her close, awkwardly at first, then firmly, the way she'd done for him so many times before. "I told you," he whispered. "You don't have to fix everything. Just be here." She buried her face in his shoulder and nodded. "You shouldn't have come." "Yeah," he said, smiling softly. "But I wanted to. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." The next few days blurred again, this time inside St. Clair's. Ethan stayed until Ryan was moved out of ICU. Lily tried to insist he go home, but he refused. "You were there when I was drowning," he told her. "Now let me hold the line for a while." She gave up arguing after that. Ryan was young, thin, with eyes too wise for his age. When he met Ethan, he grinned weakly. "So you're the guy who makes my sister forget to sleep." Ethan chuckled. "And you must be the reason she never stopped smiling." Ryan laughed, a small sound but full of life. "Then we're even." Over the next few days, Ethan helped wherever he could, fetching water, wheeling himself to the cafeteria, keeping Ryan company when Lily had to rest. The doctors began to notice him, the man in the wheelchair who didn't look like a patient anymore, but like someone who had finally found purpose. One evening, Lily joined him by the vending machine. The fluorescent lights made her eyes look softer, tired but peaceful. "You've done enough," she said. "Not yet," he replied. "You taught me that healing doesn't stop when we stand. It starts when we show up." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You really mean that, don't you?" He nodded. "I do." Something shifted between them, not spoken but felt. The air held it gently, like a secret too fragile to name. When she finally smiled, it was the first time Ethan felt truly whole again. For once, the dare wasn't about courage or defiance. It was about love, quiet, unassuming, and real. Days turned into weeks. Ryan's color returned. His smile came easier, and laughter began to echo again in the sterile halls of St. Clair's. Ethan stayed longer than he had planned, first out of concern, then out of choice. Lily never told him to leave, and he never asked if he should. It simply felt right to be there. But beneath her brave smiles, Ethan started noticing cracks. She flinched when her phone buzzed. She hesitated before opening certain letters. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't name. One quiet evening, as Ryan slept peacefully, Ethan found her outside on the hospital terrace. The city stretched below, lights flickering like heartbeats, the night air humming softly. Lily leaned against the railing, her arms folded, her face turned upward as if praying for strength. "You've been hiding something," Ethan said gently, rolling closer. She didn't move. "Everyone hides something." "Maybe," he said, "but not everyone hides it this well." She let out a shaky breath. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." There was a long pause. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "Ryan's surgery saved him, but it drained everything I had left. The bills, the overtime, I've been working 2 jobs just to keep up. The hospital might suspend me next month because I can't pay for my own medical insurance. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to see me as another broken thing you had to fix." Ethan's heart clenched. "Lily," she turned away, brushing tears quickly. "Please don't look at me like that." "You've been through enough already." He wheeled closer until they were eye level. "Don't you see? You're the reason I made it this far. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Her voice cracked. "And what can you do, Ethan? You can't walk. You can't—" She stopped herself, guilt flooding her face. "I didn't mean—" He shook his head slowly. "You're right. I can't walk, but I can still stand up for someone who stood for me." For the first time, she couldn't find words, only tears. The next morning, Ethan made some calls to his old business partner, his lawyer, his bank. By noon, he had arranged for Ryan's medical debt to be cleared. Quietly, anonymously. That afternoon, when Lily found out, she stormed into his room. "You did it, didn't you?" she said, voice trembling. "You paid for everything." Ethan didn't deny it. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because you once told me healing means showing up. This is me, showing up." Her anger melted into disbelief, then something softer. "You shouldn't have." "I know," he said quietly. That's what makes it count. The line hung between them. The same one she'd spoken to him weeks ago, now returned like a promise. Lily covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. "You remembered—" "I remember everything you say," he whispered. Then, unexpectedly, she knelt beside his chair, resting her forehead against his hand. The air filled with silence, raw, alive, sacred. He touched her hair gently. "You once dared me to stop calling myself broken. Now I dare you to stop pretending you have to be strong all the time." She lifted her face, tears glistening under the soft light. "You're impossible, Ethan." "Maybe," he said, smiling faintly, "but you made me that way. If that moment hit you hard, leave a—" Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. Later that night, as he watched her leave, something in Ethan shifted again. Deeper, quieter, stronger. He had spent months believing he was cursed to take and never give. But Lily's vulnerability showed him that love wasn't about who saved whom. It was about meeting halfway. The next few days were brighter. Ryan recovered fully and was discharged. Ethan began physiotherapy again, pushing harder, longer, steadier. Lily started smiling more too, the kind of smile that reached her eyes this time. But with healing often comes fear, fear that the fragile peace might not last. And in the stillness of one quiet afternoon, Ethan felt it coming. That lingering whisper that life always tests you right after you start to believe again. Because even as the sun poured gold into the hospital room, a storm was already gathering somewhere they couldn't see. And this time, it would test everything they had built, every step, every dare, every fragile piece of their hearts. The morning after Ryan's discharge, the world seemed to breathe easier. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth. Sunlight poured like honey through the window. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like the weight on his chest had lightened. Lily visited his rehab center again, this time without the exhaustion that used to follow her like a shadow. She wore a soft blue sweater and that familiar, determined smile. "I almost didn't recognize you," Ethan teased. "You look like someone who actually slept." "I did," she said, chuckling, "for an entire 8 hours. It's a miracle." They laughed, easy, genuine laughter that felt earned. But behind Ethan's smile, something restless stirred. He'd been holding on to a decision, one that terrified him as much as it freed him. When Lily went to refill their coffee cups, he looked down at the letter tucked beneath his notebook, the one addressed to Mark's parents. He'd written it weeks ago but never sent it. He was ready now. He didn't tell Lily immediately. He wanted to share it when he could look her in the eye and say, "I finally forgave myself." But fate, it seemed, wasn't done testing them. That afternoon, as Ethan worked through another round of therapy, his phone buzzed with a call from Lily. Her voice was shaky, panicked. "Ethan, I need you to come." "It's Ryan." Everything blurred. The corridor, the walls, the faces. By the time he reached the emergency ward, Lily was pacing outside a room, her hands trembling. "They said it's post-surgical complications," she stammered. "He was fine this morning." And then her words broke. "They don't know if he'll make it through the night." Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, but he knew what it was like to have someone say that when it wasn't. So instead, he took her hand. "Then we'll wait together." Hours passed. Machines beeped. Nurses whispered. Lily refused to leave Ryan's bedside, her fingers interlocked with her brother's limp hand. Ethan stayed outside the glass, watching her world shake. At midnight, the doctor stepped out quietly. Ethan saw it in his eyes before he spoke. "I'm sorry," the doctor said gently. "We did everything we could." Lily froze. Her body went still, too still. Then she broke. The sound that left her throat wasn't just grief. It was everything: exhaustion, loss, disbelief. Ethan moved to her, his chair barely keeping up as she fell against him, sobbing into his chest. "I can't do this again," she cried. "I can't lose him too." He held her tighter. "You don't have to do this alone," she shook her head, tears blurring her words. "It's not fair. He was supposed to have time. He was supposed to live." Ethan closed his eyes, his heart fracturing for her. He knew this pain, the kind that leaves you hollow. And yet, through the ache, one truth pulsed steady inside him. "Lily," he whispered, "you gave him more love than most people get in a lifetime. He didn't leave empty." She pulled back, her face streaked with tears. "How do you forgive the world when it takes everything?" He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Maybe you don't. Maybe you just keep loving anyway. That's how you win." Her sobs quieted. She stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not the man in the wheelchair, not the broken soul she'd helped heal, but someone who finally understood what it meant to lose and still stay gentle. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply. The funeral was small, a handful of friends, nurses, and patients whose lives Ryan had touched. Lily stood at the front, reading from a crumpled piece of paper. Her voice cracked halfway through, and Ethan wheeled forward to rest his hand on her arm. She didn't falter after that. When it was over, she lingered by the grave long after everyone left. Ethan stayed beside her, silent. The sky had turned pale gray as if mourning too. "He's really gone?" she whispered. "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "But you're still here, and that matters." Her tears came slower this time. "You sound like me," he smiled faintly. "Guess your lesson stuck." That night, he finally mailed the letter to Mark's parents. He told them everything, the truth, the guilt, and how someone named Lily had taught him that broken people can still give the most light. When he hit send, he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for a year. Outside his window, dawn began to break, not loudly, just gently, like forgiveness finding its way home. Weeks passed, but time didn't heal. It simply softened the edges. The world moved on, as it always does, but for Lily and Ethan, each morning still carried a quiet ache. The space where Ryan used to be was everywhere, in her apartment, in her laughter that now came slower, and in the silence between their conversations. Ethan visited her often. Sometimes they spoke for hours, sometimes not at all. Grief had its own language, and silence was one of its dialects. One cold evening, he found her sitting on the balcony, a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the horizon. The city lights blinked below like distant fireflies. "Do you ever stop hearing their voice?" she asked softly. Ethan rolled closer, the sound of his wheels barely audible. "Not really, it just fades into something else. Like a memory that hums instead of screams." Lily nodded, her eyes glassy but calm. "He wanted to see the ocean," she murmured. "He used to say the waves made him feel infinite." "Then let's take him there," Ethan said quietly. She looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "His ashes. We'll go. We'll give him the horizon he always wanted." It was a simple idea, but in that moment, it was everything. 2 days later, they drove to the coast in Lily's car. Ethan watched the world blur by. Hills, rivers, children flying kites. He hadn't been this far from home in years. When they arrived, the air was cold and sharp with salt. The ocean stretched endlessly, roaring and alive. Lily carried the urn close to her chest, her hair whipped by the wind. They stood at the edge of the pier. Ethan's hands rested on the railing. Lily's trembled as she unscrewed the lid. "Goodbye, little brother," she whispered, her voice carried off by the sea breeze. "You're free now." The ashes scattered, catching the sunlight as they danced over the waves. For a second, just a second, it felt like he was there with them, laughing somewhere between the wind and the tide. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks, but she was smiling too, not from joy, but from peace. Ethan watched her and felt something shift inside him. She turned to him, eyes red but bright. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For reminding me that endings can still be beautiful." He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the waves crash and curl. The sun began to set, staining the sky with amber and rose. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder, and he didn't move. He just let her be, and for once that was enough. As night fell, the stars began to pierce through the dark like promises. Ethan whispered almost to himself. Maybe broken things aren't meant to be fixed. Maybe they're meant to be made into something new. Lily looked up at him. "Then maybe we start over, both of us." He met her gaze. "Maybe we already have." If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. The following weeks became a gentle rhythm. Ethan returned to therapy, stronger now, not just in body but in purpose. He began volunteering at the rehab center, helping others who had lost their confidence, who believed they'd never walk again, never love again. Lily came too, sometimes reading stories to patients, sometimes just sitting beside them and listening. Her laughter was softer now, but it had warmth again. They weren't a couple, not yet, but they were something. Two souls stitched together by loss, learning how to live again. One evening, as they locked up the therapy room, Lily turned to him and said, "You know what Ryan would have said if he saw us now?" Ethan smiled. Probably something sarcastic, something like, "About time you two stopped being so miserable." They both laughed, and it echoed through the empty hall, alive with life again. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, not harsh, not cold, just gentle enough to remind them that storms don't always destroy. Sometimes they cleanse. Ethan tilted his head back, letting the rain touch his face. He hadn't done that in years. Lily reached out, catching the drops on her palm. "It's like he's saying goodbye," she said. "Or hello," Ethan whispered. And for the first time since the accident, since the hospital, since the loss, he felt whole. Not healed, not perfect, but whole enough to move forward. Months passed like quiet pages turning in a book they weren't ready to finish. Spring crept in gently, painting the city in soft greens and golds. Ethan had started walking again, slow, uncertain steps with the help of crutches. Each one was a small miracle, and Lily was there for every stumble, every triumph. One morning, she found him sitting in the therapy garden, sunlight threading through the branches above him. A letter rested in his lap. The reply from Mark's parents. He handed it to her wordlessly. She hesitated, then unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but kind. "Ethan, we received your letter. We've spent months hating you, blaming you, cursing your name. But then we read your words and something inside us broke. The part that refused to see you as human. We forgive you, not because what happened doesn't hurt, but because holding on to pain has hurt us more. Thank you for remembering our son with honesty and love. May you find peace too. The Harrisons. Lily finished reading and looked up. Ethan's eyes were glassy, but he was smiling faintly, a fragile, trembling smile. They forgave me, he whispered, voice barely holding together. After everything, Lily knelt beside him, her hand resting on his. Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain, she said softly. Maybe it's about letting the heart breathe again. He nodded slowly. Then I think I can finally breathe. They sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need words because everything worth saying already exists in the space between heartbeats. A bird landed near their feet, tilting its head as if listening. Lily laughed quietly, and for a moment, even the air seemed lighter. Later that evening, she helped him into the car. The city passed by in streaks of amber and blue, and they stopped at a small diner they used to visit during Ryan's treatments. The waitress recognized them immediately. "Long time no see," she said warmly. "You two look different. In a good way." Lily smiled. "Yeah. It's been a long road." They ate quietly, sharing small stories. About the kids at the center, about Ethan's progress, about how Ryan's old sketchbook still sat on Lily's nightstand. The conversation flowed like soft music, healing in its simplicity. When they finished, Ethan took out a small folded note and slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I wrote for you," he said. After that night at the hospital, she opened it slowly. The handwriting was uneven, careful, the way people write when every word matters. "You were the first person who saw me when I thought I was invisible. You dared me to live again when I didn't think I could. You reminded me that broken doesn't mean worthless. If you ever doubt yourself, remember this. You woke a heart that had forgotten how to beat." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "Ethan," he smiled shyly, "it's not poetry, just truth." She folded the note carefully, like something sacred, and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "Then here's mine," she whispered. "I'm proud of you, not because you stood again, but because you stayed when it hurt." For a while they said nothing. The air between them was charged, not romantic in the way movies show it, but real, tender, earned. Outside, the first stars began to flicker awake. Lily glanced up at the window's reflection and said, "Do you think he'd be happy for us?" Ethan followed her gaze. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think Ryan's somewhere out there laughing that big goofy laugh of his, telling us to stop overthinking and just live." They both smiled. The car ride back was quiet. When they reached her building, Lily didn't get out immediately. She just sat there watching him with the kind of look that feels like home. "Thank you," she said again, barely above a whisper. He shook his head. "No, thank you." "You dared me to feel again," she leaned in, kissed his cheek, light as a sigh, and stepped out into the soft night. Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd stood, his heart both heavy and full. For once he wasn't afraid of the quiet. It was peace, the kind that comes after storms. He looked up at the sky and murmured, "We made it, Ryan. She made me whole again. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you." The next morning, sunlight spilled through his window, painting everything gold. On his bedside table lay two things, Lily's note and the empty envelope from the Harrisons. He reached for his phone and opened a new document. The title read, "From a Dare to Desire, How She Awakened My Heart." He smiled. Not every story ends in love, but this one ended in life, and maybe that's all any heart truly needs.